Constitution, and they tried to trash our democracy, and we revived it, and we protected it. This was the most bipartisan presidential impeachment in the history of the United States. And we know that impeachment, for reasons that we could explore at some other time, often becomes partisan. But this was the most bipartisan presidential impeachment event in the history of the country. It was also the largest Senate vote for a presidential impeachment, 57 to 43. And of course, the vote to impeach was 232 to 197 in the House. So we have a clear and convincing majority of members of Congress that the president actually incited violent insurrection against the Union and against the Congress. Senator Mitch McConnell just went to the floor essentially to say that we made our case on the facts, that he believed that Donald Trump was practically and morally responsible for inciting the events of January 6th. He described it, as we did, as a disgraceful dereliction of duty, a desertion of his office. And he made a series of statements that we didn't even make, saying that this was not over yet by a long shot, essentially, and that there was the path of criminal prosecution for the former president, the disgraced and now twice impeached former president. So the bottom line is that we convinced a big majority in the Senate of our case. I'm very proud of the exceptional hard work of these managers who worked through the night, many nights over several weeks, to make this case to the Senate and to the Union. As to, I just want to say, one word about the whole thing about witnesses. We were able to get treated as live under oath testimony, the statement of our colleague, Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler. We were able to get a stipulation to that and get it into evidence today by asking for her as a witness. If you listen to Mitch McConnell and the Republicans who are now hurriedly explaining why they voted not to convict, all of them are hinging it on a legal argument, jurisdictional or some other legal argument that could never be overcome by any number of witnesses. We could have had 5,000 witnesses and Mitch McConnell would be making the same speech, because what he's asserting is that the Senate never has jurisdiction over a former president. And for reasons I don't need to belabor, because a big part of the trial was about this, we reject that completely. It's totally at odds with our history, the Blunt case, the Belknap case, the text of the Constitution, the original intent of the Constitution, the original understanding of the Constitution, the Senate's own precedents, and so on. But in any event, the point is that no number of witnesses demonstrating that Donald Trump continued to incite the insurrectionists even after the invasion of the Capitol would convince them. They wouldn't be convinced. They were hinging it on a matter of law, which we thought we had settled back on Tuesday, of course, when the Senate elected to exercise jurisdiction and to reject that jurisdictional constitutional argument. But it is what it is. Mitch McConnell clearly feels that Donald Trump remains a huge problem for the Republican Party, even if he has been disgraced in the eyes of the country. And that is not my jurisdiction, and I really don't have anything to say about that. I think they will have to deal with the political dynamics within their own party. So we did get Donald Trump at least to admit that he's a former president now. So that's good news. He's not asserting that somehow he's still president, and they're recognizing, at least in a de facto sense, the legitimacy of this presidential election, which of course President Biden won by more than 7 million votes and by a margin of 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. With that, I will close my remarks, and the questions are open for any of us, and I'm going to share the podium with my distinguished colleagues. Okay. Yes, I'm going to discuss.
Speaking about witnesses, at the beginning of this proceeding, there was a procedural motion. 5 Republicans broke ranks. They voted on the Rand Paul motion. Then there constitutionality. Today there were 7 who broke ranks on conviction. So what's to say if you didn't push harder on witnesses, try to get someone who could provide shed more light into Donald Trump's thinking, that you couldn't have grown the number of Republican defectors?
All right. Somebody else want to take a shot at that? I thought I addressed that, but anybody else want to? Yes, please, Stacey.
Listen, we heard from the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, that we have proven the case. He said specifically, the House managers have proven the facts of the case. And before we started yesterday, we knew when we rested with overwhelming evidence as to the facts of this case. These all jurors were also witnesses to the crime. They knew specifically what was happening. And then there was, we found additional information about Herrera Butler, which on yesterday evening, we decided that we were going to go after. And we got it. We got that information to further amplify what we had already proven there in court. There is no other additional witnesses that were friendly to us that were not there on the screen. The body cameras of the Capitol Police officers, how much more resonance would that have given to them than the actual seeing the day of the insurrection? Individuals that others of us would have liked to have called, like the president, who we invited, is in fact the defendant and does not have to testify. Other individuals who may have been there with the president were not friendly witnesses to us and would have required subpoenas and months of litigation. They are still litigating McGahn in impeachment 1 a year later. And so we believe that we have shown that this president is a disgrace to our country. Mitch McConnell himself said that. These senators have decided to hang their hat on jurisdictional grounds which are not based in evidence, which are not based on the facts, and they will have to be judged for that. We have done our duty to the American people.
Did you consider Kevin McCarthy at all as a possible witness?
Let me introduce Speaker Pelosi, and I'll come to you next.
Thank you. It had not been my intention to come to this press availability, however tempting it would be to sing the praises of our House managers on behalf not only of the House of Representatives, on behalf of the American people, and I have to say personally on behalf of my grandchildren, who drew great hope and inspiration from each and every one of you. We could not be prouder of your patriotic presentations, the clarity in which you presented, and again, the inspiration that you have been to so many people. So I thank you for that. When I see all of them, it reminds me that when we recruit candidates to run for office, or we see them self-recruiting, we always say, and they'll say, well, I could be the president of my university, or I could be the head of my hospital department, or this or that. And so I have to think about whether I run for Congress. We always say, we don't want anybody without options. That's why we're looking to you to run, because you have options. That shouldn't be a reason for you not to run. But what we saw in that Senate today was a cowardly group of Republicans who apparently have no options because they were afraid to defend their job, respect the institution in which they served. Imagine that it would be vandalized in so many bad ways that I won't even go into here, and that they would not respect their institute. That the president of the Senate, Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence, was the chant, and they just dismissed that. Why? Because maybe they can't get another job. What is so important about any one of us? What is so important about the political survival of any one of us that is more important than our Constitution that we take an oath to protect and defend? But why I came over was because I listened to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, who when this distinguished group of House managers were gathered on January 15th to deliver the articles of impeachment. We're told it could not be received because Mitch McConnell had shut down the Senate and was going to keep it shut down until the inauguration. So for him to get up there and make this indictment against the president and then say, but I can't vote for it because it's after the fact that he established that it could not be delivered before the inauguration. Now, when you think about January 6th, between January 6th and January 20th, you're only talking about just under 2 weeks, a day under 2 weeks. So the big lie, stop the steal, the big lie that you talked about, stop the steal, was the momentum for getting these people there on the 6th. They honestly believe, for whatever reason, maybe too much social media, whatever. Watch Social Media, that movie. So why they were thinking that was true, that the election was not legitimate, whatever the reason the president told them. So, okay, so that's the 6th. The week later, we impeach in the House. Thank you to those of you who participated right away. Jamie Raskin, Ted Lieu, and David Cicilline. Where's David Cicilline? They had it all written up and ready to go. Bipartisanly passed the House, and then 2 days later, ready with the case to take to the Senate. Oh, we can't receive it. Not a question. And then by the law, you're supposed to receive it and the next day start the trial. So for Mitch McConnell, who created the situation where it could not have been heard before the 20th, or even begun before the 20th in the Senate, to say all the things he said, oh my gosh, about Donald Trump and how horrible he was and is, and then say, but the time that the House chose to bring it over. No, we didn't choose. You chose not to receive it. So I think that's really important. And again, it doesn't matter. As Jamie and others have told us, you can have the case after the person is out of office. So it's an elementary discussion. The Senate rules in that way and honoring a precedent on this. So it didn't matter, except it was not the reason that he voted the way he did. It was the excuse that he used. And so that's why I think it's important, because that was a very important speech. I thought Chuck Schumer's speech was remarkable in laying it all out. I think he was inspired by all of you, because you raised the level of all of this to such a place of patriotism and knowledge of our country, our history, and what we owe our children. Again, we always say, honoring the vision of our founders, worthy of the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, and respecting the aspirations of our children. They did all of that. And as Jamie, the distinguished lead manager said earlier on this presidential weekend, our sense of patriotism is stirred, and we're called upon in a stronger way. So I want to thank them. I want to thank Stacy Poskett. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Madeline Dean. Thank you very much, Joe Naguse. Thank you, Eric Swalwell. Thank you, Diana DeGette. Thank you, David Cicilline. Thank you, Ted Lieu. Thank you, Joaquin Castro. Thank you very much, Mr. Lead Manager, on all of this. We just couldn't be prouder. I've been hearing from my grandchildren who are very sad that justice wasn't done. But by 15 votes, the Senate voted to convict. A good bipartisan statement about what has happened. It would not have been accomplished without your brilliant presentation. So I thank you for that, and I yield the floor back to all of you as I leave.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you for your confidence in us. I was going to go next to Scott. Were you going to take the next one, David? Is that good? Okay.
I was
Scott.
curious, though, for the Speaker, if she had a comment about Ms. McConnell's statement on the floor President Trump still was liable criminally or civilly for everything he did in office. Do you think now that the Justice Department or State Attorney General should pursue the legal?
He even hedged on that. Remember when he talked about incitement? He said he didn't think this rose to level. Oh, and so he was hedging all over the place. I don't know whether it was for donors or what, but whatever it was a very disingenuous speech. And I say that regretfully because I always want to be able to work with the leadership of the other party. I think our country needs a strong Republican Party. It's very important, and for him to try to have it every which way. But we will be going forward to make sure that this never happens again in terms of to investigate and evaluate what caused this, and both in terms of the motivation, but also in terms of the security that we have to have as we go forward, recognizing how inflaming even some of our elected officials can be. But I defer to all these distinguished lawyers about what happened.
All right, let's see. So
But Speaker Pelosi, is censure
I'll come to you and then I'll come to you. I'm sorry.
is censure an option right now then?
Censure is a slap in the face of the Constitution. That lets everybody off the hook. It lets everybody off the hook. Oh, these cowardly senators who couldn't face up to what the president did and what was at stake for our country are now going to have a chance to give a little slap on the wrist. We censure people for using stationery for the wrong purpose. We don't censure people for inciting insurrection that kills people in the Capitol.
You're here.
Yes.
Can you explain how you went from wanting the contemporaneous notes from the Congresswoman deposition, possibly leading to other depositions, to then entering an already public statement into the trial record? Did you try and reach out to her at all? And then separately, did the White House either indirectly or directly have any involvement in the decision to call new witnesses?
You know what? I mean, I don't want to. We tried this case as aggressively as we could on the law and on the facts. We did everything that we could. We got from the president's lawyers exactly what we wanted, which was the entering into the evidentiary record of the statement by our colleague, Congresswoman Butler. And we got that. I was able to read it before the entire country, and it became part of the case, and it became an important part of our case. If, again, we could have had 500 witnesses, and it would not have overcome the kinds of arguments being made by Mitch McConnell and other Republicans who were hanging their hats on the claim that it was somehow unconstitutional to try a former president, or that the First Amendment somehow gave him a right to incite violent insurrection against the Union. And though, they're going to have to live with those arguments that they made. But we think that we overwhelmingly proved our case. I think Mitch McConnell's statement showed that they knew we overwhelmingly proved our case. And all that might have happened if we had, bargained for 10 witnesses on our side, 10 witnesses on their side. The first person they said they wanted to bring up and to cross-examine is Nancy Pelosi. They would have turned the whole thing into a circus. And we conducted it with solemnity and legal seriousness and decorum. And you saw the conduct of the lawyers on the other side, and you know what Donald Trump's track record is. We were not going to allow them to turn it into a farce. Yeah,
Why didn't you raise her comments sooner? She said in her statement, so why didn't you introduce it in the trial sooner? Why didn't you?
At least the first time that I saw the statement was yesterday. It was that statement was released yesterday. So, but what's interesting is that the premise of some of these questions is somehow that we failed to prove the facts of the case. I think in the eyes of the entire world and the country, we overwhelmingly proved the facts of the case. And Senator McConnell just conceded that wasn't the issue. I mean, you got to talk to the the 43 senators who were basically saying no amount of facts would have made any difference to them because they didn't think that the president was subject to the jurisdiction of the Senate. That was the argument you just heard Mitch McConnell make. So forgive me for reacting strongly to that, but that seems to me to be a completely bizarre conclusion to these events, to say that somehow if we had just had one more witness, Mitch McConnell would have come over to our side. Just listen to his words. Yes, sir.
Congressman, thank you. Just to follow up on the earlier question, did the White House convey to you in any way that they did not want witnesses because it might draw out the process? Did the White House tell you they wanted a short, condensed trial?
I never spoke to anyone from the White House or to President Biden or to Vice President Harris. None of them. No. And I made the call. So you want to blame somebody?
I think we were just trying to understand how,
Yeah.
in terms of witnesses, how you got from out.
Well, remember, when you get in a situation like this, if we had needed any witnesses to make our case, then we would have gone all the way and insisted on witnesses in a 6-week trial or an 8-week trial or whatever. We didn't. We overwhelmingly proved our case. Senator McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, just conceded that, right? All of them are saying, well, you won on the facts.
But I think you're confusing.
So-
You said something. It was two things that we had to do, right?
And then we'll just take one more
We had to first have a motion for witnesses, which we did when we were supposed to do it, which was after the prosecution and the defense made their case. We made a motion to allow for witnesses. And then after that, we requested one witness. The Republican counsel for the president, the former president, said he was going to bring 100 witnesses. We got the essence of what we wanted, which was the statement of Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler. The defense got nothing. And I think that what you're doing is making a lot out of and dismissing the incredible evidence of havoc, mayhem, and what this president had done over a period of months to bring destruction to our democracy by talking about if you had 2 or 3 more witnesses, what was going to happen.
Yeah, one thing I would just add to it is, remember, there's a reason that the request for witnesses comes at the conclusion of the case, because we had an opportunity to see the former president's counsel, and decided whether we needed to provide additional witnesses. Don't forget, our case was filled with dozens of witnesses who were presented by way of video and statements and recordings. And it was only last night we learned about this new information, and we got the best of both worlds. We got that testimony in the record before the jury without any risk associated with it. And that's important to remember. This is a congresswoman who repeats a telephone call between Kevin McCarthy and the former president of the United States, in which Kevin McCarthy is pleading for help, saying, help us, we're under attack. The president first tries to blame another group, Antifa, and he says, no, Mr. President, these are your supporters, and we're in danger here. And he says, well, Kevin, maybe they care more about the election than you do. That came before the Senate jury through the statement that Mr. Raskin read. So we got the evidence in of the witness that we wanted to present, and that was a victory for us.
The defendant, President Donald John Trump, was let off on a technicality. And that's essentially what you heard Mitch McConnell say, that they let him off on what they perceived, at least, to be a procedural issue, which was because of the constitutionality of the matter, they couldn't proceed to the substance. Doctrinal interpretation, both on the liberal side and the conservative side, strongly disagrees with that assessment, but they let him off on a technicality. And you also heard Mitch McConnell go up there and say, essentially, that we overwhelmingly proved our case, that substantively, Donald Trump is guilty of inciting an insurrection. And it has been, I know for all of us, an honor to work and a solemn honor to work on this case. And even though we didn't get 67 votes, this has been the most bipartisan vote for impeachment and conviction ever. And we know that we spoke the truth on the Senate floor. And the American people, by and large, have agreed with us. And one final remark on all of this, this episode from January 6th on has been very taxing on the American people, ushered in a new era, thanks to Donald Trump, of political violence. And so, most of all, my reaction to the decision of a majority of Republican senators not to convict Donald Trump, despite the overwhelming evidence, is not only sadness, but also apprehension for the nation. Because as I said during my remarks, the defense counsel's main argument is that there's nothing wrong with what Donald Trump did, and he could do it all over again. And as a nation, we just have to hope that that isn't the case.
All right, I think that we're going to close it up. I just want to remind everybody that this was the most bipartisan impeachment in the history of the United States. It was the largest vote in the U.S. Senate ever to convict a president who's been impeached. And it was the most bipartisan conviction vote in the Senate that we've ever seen in a case of a presidential impeachment. But there's one other number to look out for if you listen carefully to what's being said now after the trial. There are 57 senators who voted to convict on the facts and the law. Now, add to that the number of senators who say they believe that Donald Trump was factually guilty, but that the Senate didn't have jurisdiction or there was some other constitutional issue. But just take the ones who say, we don't think that we could convict him because of this January exception. He was able to get away with it at the end of his term. If 10 or 15 or 20 of them say that, that means you've got a supermajority who are saying that the president actually is guilty of his crimes, which we think we have overwhelmingly and convincingly demonstrated to the American people. Thank you all very much.
I gotta go this way first. My bag is over here.
Envíos es una empresa especializada en el transporte de encomiendas desde Estados Unidos a Colombia y Venezuela. La transparencia es una de las cualidades que nos caracteriza. La entrega de sus empaques está 100% garantizada.